She texted me on WhatsApp, "Don't overthink. He's just a friend," smiling face with smiling eyes, while posting cozy pictures with him on Instagram. I took screenshots of both and sent them to her family group chat. The silence after that message was loud. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. Don't overthink it, okay? He's just a friend. That was her exact message. 13 words, 1 emoji, sent at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday night, while I was sitting alone in our apartment with a half-eaten bowl of pasta going cold in front of me. I stared at my phone screen for a long time. Not because the message confused me, because it didn't. It was the kind of message that's designed to sound reassuring, but lands like a confession. The kind of thing you only say when someone has a reason not to be reassured. I set the phone face down on the coffee table. I picked up the pasta. I stared at the wall. And then, because I apparently have a habit of doing things I'll either be very proud of or deeply regret, I picked the phone back up and opened Instagram. Her username popped up at the very top of my feed. Posted 4 minutes ago. I remember thinking that was almost impressive timing. She had sent me that message, then opened Instagram and posted a photo, all within a span of minutes while wherever she was, with whoever she was with, doing whatever she was doing. I tapped the post. It loaded slowly, like even my phone was reluctant to show me what was on the screen. And when it did, I sat there for a moment just processing what I was looking at. It was a photo of her, and a man I had never seen before in my life. Or, correction, a man I had only heard about in passing, in the way you hear about someone who you're apparently not supposed to think too much about. They were at a rooftop bar. City lights behind them. Her head was tilted toward his shoulder. Not on it. Not quite. But tilted. That specific angle that sits somewhere between friendly and something else entirely. She was laughing in the photo, and it wasn't the kind of laugh she performed for pictures. It was the real one. The slightly open-mouthed, eyes crinkling, completely caught off guard laugh. The one I used to feel proud about causing. He had his arm around her waist. Not her shoulder. Her waist. The caption said, "Good vibes only." 412 likes. 46 comments. I didn't read any of them. I just sat there with my cold pasta and the glow of the screen in my face and the very clear, very specific realization forming in my chest, like something solidifying out of liquid. I did not overthink it. I understood it completely. Let me back up slightly, because context matters here, even if just a little. I'm 29. At the time this happened, I'd been with Camille for almost 3 years. 3 years and 2 months, to be exact, though I stopped counting the months after the first year, because that's what adults do. We'd been living together for 8 months. Her things were on my bathroom counter. Her handwriting was on the grocery list on the fridge. Her voice was the last thing I heard before falling asleep most nights. We were, by every visible measure, serious. People at her office knew my name without being introduced. My family had started using "when you two" instead of "if you two." We talked about the future. Not vaguely either. Specifically, which city, what kind of neighborhood, whether we'd want a dog before kids or after. All of it. That was us. That was who I thought we were. His name was Daniel. I'd heard it maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of 2 months. Not a lot, but enough. Each mention was casual. Strategically casual, I would later realize. Daniel from work thought it was funny too. Oh yeah, Daniel mentioned that restaurant. Apparently the pasta's incredible. Daniel's in the industry. He's kind of fascinating to talk to. Short sentences. Dropped into conversation like they were nothing. And I didn't react, because what was there to react to? People have coworkers. People have friends. People mention them. I'm not that guy. Or at least, I wasn't trying to be. But the first time I heard his name, I noticed her voice changed very slightly. Not dramatically. Not the way it changes in movies when someone's hiding something obvious. Just a small shift. A half-beat of brightness that arrived when the name did. I filed it somewhere in the back of my mind and kept moving. That was probably my first mistake. Not a moral one. Just a practical one. The second time Daniel came up, we were cooking dinner together. She was telling me about her week, and somewhere in the middle of describing a meeting that had run long, she said, "Daniel actually saved the whole thing. Honestly, he came up with a framing idea that completely turned it around." I handed her the olive oil. "Who's Daniel?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Oh, I mentioned him before," she said, like she was surprised I'd forgotten. "From the new project team. He's been working there about 3 months." She turned back to the stove. "He's good," she added. "Really sharp." I nodded, made a sound that communicated I was listening. And I was. I was listening very carefully. I just didn't say what I was actually thinking, which was, why does your voice do that thing when you say his name? Months passed. The mentions increased slowly, gradually enough that if I hadn't been paying attention, I would have missed the pattern entirely. But I was paying attention. I'm the kind of person who notices things and stays quiet about them until I know what I'm looking at. Not out of strategy, just out of habit. I grew up in a house where you learn to observe first and speak second. So I observed. And what I observed was this. Camille became slightly more careful with her phone around me. Not dramatically. Not the snatching it off the table way. Just more deliberate. She'd used to leave it face up on the couch, on the kitchen counter, on the nightstand. It would buzz and she'd glance at it from across the room without moving. Now she kept it in her hand more. Or flipped it over when it lit up. Or angled the screen away slightly when she was scrolling. Small things. The kind of things that, individually, mean nothing. Together, they said something. About 6 weeks before the night with the text and the Instagram post, I asked her directly. We were on the couch, Sunday afternoon, nothing in particular happening. I said, hey, this Daniel guy, what's actually going on there? She turned to look at me slowly. What do you mean what's going on? You mention him a lot, I said. He's just a coworker. A friend. I know, I said. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking how close you actually are. She seemed to relax at that. We're work friends, she said. He's in a different department. We talk sometimes. He's got a girlfriend anyway. That last part was interesting. Not what she said, but that she said it. Because I hadn't asked. When you volunteer information that nobody asked for, it's not usually because you're transparent. It's because you're preemptive. But I let it go. I believed her. Not fully, but enough. Enough to not push further. Enough to go back to watching whatever we were watching and pretend that conversation had satisfied something it actually hadn't. The weeks after that were fine. Not great. Fine. We went to dinner. We had good nights. We argued about small things and resolved them the way you do when you've been together long enough to know how the other person needs space. But something had shifted very slightly beneath the surface. Like the ground was still level, but you could feel something moving underneath it. She was a little more distant some evenings. Not cold. Just somewhere else in her head. When I asked about her day, the answers were complete, but slightly rehearsed feeling. And the phone thing continued. The careful phone thing. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was being the paranoid guy I'd always promised myself I wouldn't be. I told myself that 3 years of something real didn't evaporate over a coworker named Daniel. I told myself all of that. Right up until 11:43 p.m. on that Thursday. She had told me she was going out with some people from the office. Not Daniel specifically. Some people. Which is a phrase that means, I am technically telling you the truth while structuring it in a way that obscures the specific truth I don't want you to notice. I'd said, have fun, text me when you're heading back. She'd kissed me on the cheek. She smelled good. She was wearing that green top I'd always said looked great on her. The door closed. I did some work stuff on my laptop. I ate the pasta. I watched half an episode of something I can't even remember now. And then at 11:43, my phone buzzed. It was a message from her that said, having a great time, probably another hour or so. I replied, no rush, just let me know. And then 4 minutes later, at 11:47, a second message appeared. Don't overthink it, okay? He's just a friend. I had not said anything. I had not asked anything. I had not expressed any concern. My last message was 4 words. No rush, just let me know. And yet she sent that, unprompted, which meant something had happened in those 4 minutes that made her feel the need to preemptively reassure me. Something she saw, or something he said, or something that happened that made her pull out her phone and type that message. Something that made her feel like she needed to get ahead of it. And that something was, as I found 4 minutes later on Instagram, a photo of her with his arm around her waist and her laughing the real laugh under rooftop city lights. I sat with both of those things on my screen for a while. The WhatsApp message, the Instagram post, side by side in my head. I wasn't angry yet. I was something quieter than angry. I was in that still place you sometimes get to right before a decision, where everything slows down and gets very clear. I looked at the message again. Don't overthink it, okay? He's just a friend. I looked at the photo again. His arm around her waist. Her real laugh. The green top she'd worn specifically that night. The caption, good vibes only. Posted publicly. For anyone to see. Including me, apparently, though something told me she hadn't quite thought that part through. Here's what I want you to understand about what I did next. I am not a dramatic person. I am not someone who creates scenes. I've been in exactly one genuine argument that ended with raised voices in my entire adult life, and I still think about whether I handled that correctly. I don't blow things up. I don't act out of spite. I don't make decisions when I'm in the emotional hot zone. I sit with things. I think them through. I consider the other person's perspective. I ask myself if I'm missing something. I did all of that. I gave myself the full process. And what came out the other side of that process was not anger. It was something colder. Something that had been building for weeks and had finally found a shape. It was clarity. I opened WhatsApp. Not to text her back. She had a family group chat. I know that sounds like I immediately went nuclear, and maybe it does, but hear me out, because there's context here that matters. Camille's family was extremely involved in our relationship. Her mother, her father, her older sister, her aunt who lived 2 hours away and texted more than anyone I've ever met. They knew my name, my job, my opinions on things, my parents' names. We'd spent holidays together. Her mother called me by a nickname that I'd never asked for, but had somehow stuck. They were part of this relationship in a real, present, active way, which meant that when Camille talked to them about us, and she did, frequently, they were getting a version of our relationship curated by her. And that version, I was now certain, did not include Daniel, or the green top, or the rooftop bar, or the arm around the waist. Here's the other thing. 2 weeks before that night, Camille and I had had a conversation I hadn't fully understood at the time. We were talking about trust, not arguing, just talking. And she'd said something that had felt odd when she said it, but that I hadn't interrogated. She'd said, "I just think trust means not having to justify yourself to anyone. Not to your partner, not to your family. If someone trusts you, they trust you. They don't need proof." I'd nodded. I'd agreed in a general way, because in the abstract, that's reasonable. But now, sitting on that couch with those two screens open, I understood what she'd actually been saying. She'd been setting a precedent. She'd been preemptively establishing the framework for, if I get caught, the violation is your distrust, not my actions. And I had nodded along, like a fool. I took screenshots. One of the WhatsApp message. Clear as anything. Don't overthink it, okay? He's just a friend. 11:47 p.m. One of the Instagram post. Timestamp visible. His arm visible. Her laugh visible. The caption visible. I looked at both screenshots together in my camera roll. They told an extremely complete story. A story that required no narration, no commentary, no editorializing. Just, here is what she said, and here is what was happening while she said it. I sat there for a long moment. I'm not going to pretend I wasn't thinking about consequences. I was. I thought about how this would land. I thought about what it would do to her relationship with her family in the short term. I thought about whether there was a version of this where I was wrong. Whether the arm was just the way they stood. Whether the laugh was just how she looked in that lighting. Whether I was, in fact, overthinking it exactly the way she'd told me not to. I went back through my memory of the last 2 months. The names dropped like breadcrumbs. The phone held carefully. The "he has a girlfriend," she'd said without me asking. The "some people from the office." The green top. The message sent 4 minutes after I'd said nothing that would have prompted it. No, I wasn't overthinking anything. I understood exactly what I was looking at. The family group chat was called something cheerful. The kind of name families give group chats to make them feel warm. There were 7 people in it, including Camille, her parents, her sister, her aunt, a cousin she was close to, and me. Yes, I was in it. I had been for over a year. Because that was how serious this was. That was how embedded I was in the fabric of her family life. Which is, I'll say again, important context. I wasn't some outsider lobbing a grenade. I was part of this. And part of being part of something is that you exist within it when things go wrong, not just when things go well. I typed nothing. No caption. No explanation. No "look at this," or "thought you should see this," or anything. Just the 2 screenshots. Side by side. The timestamp on the WhatsApp message, 11:47 p.m. Her telling me not to overthink, that he's just a friend. And the Instagram post from 11:43 p.m. 4 minutes before the message. His arm around her waist. Her real laugh. City lights. Good vibes only. I looked at it for one more moment. And then I sent it. The read receipts appeared quickly. Not hers. She was still out. Her aunt's first. Then her sister's. Then her mother's. One by one, like dominoes. And then nothing. No replies. No reactions. No "what is this?" or "wait," "explain," or the outrage or the defense I might have expected. Just silence. The group chat, which was usually active even at this hour, completely still. And that silence was the loudest thing I'd heard in a very long time. I put my phone face down on the coffee table again. I finished what was left of the pasta, which was now entirely cold. I sat with the television off and just let the apartment be quiet around me. There was a part of me, a small but present part, that felt something like relief. Not victory, not satisfaction. Relief. The relief of a person who has been carrying something they couldn't quite name for weeks and has finally set it down somewhere visible. Whatever came next was going to be complicated. I knew that. Whatever was going to happen in the next hours and days was going to be difficult and probably painful and would likely involve conversations I did not want to have. But the alternative was to keep carrying it. And I was done carrying it. At 12:31 a.m., my phone buzzed. Not the group chat. Her name, calling. I let it ring. Not out of spite. Out of practicality. Whatever she was going to say, I was not in the place to receive it at 12:31 a.m. in an apartment that still smelled faintly like the pasta she wasn't there to eat. The call went to voicemail. She didn't leave one. 3 minutes later, a WhatsApp message. Call me back, please. Then, 30 seconds after that, I can explain. I read both. I put the phone down. At 1:15 a.m., her sister texted me. Not on the group chat. Directly. She said, I'm not going to say you did the right thing, but I'm not going to say you did the wrong thing either. I hope you're okay. That was it. No more. I stared at that message for a while, because it told me something. Her sister knew me well enough to know I wouldn't have done this over nothing. And it told me something else too. It told me that on some level, maybe I wasn't the only one who'd noticed things about Daniel. Maybe there had been things said in that family unit that hadn't made it to me. Maybe the silence in that group chat wasn't just shock. Maybe it was the silence of people who had been worried and hadn't known what to do with the worry. I'm speculating. I don't know that for certain, but that's what the message felt like. At 1:45 a.m., I heard her key in the front door. I was still on the couch. I hadn't moved to bed. I don't know if that was intentional or if I just lost track of time. The door opened. She stepped inside. She was still in the green top. She stopped when she saw me sitting there. The light from the kitchen was on. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything for what felt like a genuinely long time. Then she said, "Why would you do that?" And her voice cracked on the last word. Not in a guilty way, in a hurt way. And something in me registered that, but didn't move toward it the way it once would have. "Sit down," I said. She didn't. "Why would you do that to me?" she said again, louder this time. "In the family chat? Do you know what my mother?" "Camille," I said. Just her name. Quiet. And something in the way I said it made her stop. Because I wasn't yelling. I wasn't cold. I wasn't performing anything. I was just sitting there, entirely still, entirely certain of what I knew. And that, apparently, was more alarming than anything else I could have done. She sat down. Not next to me. On the chair across from the couch. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said. "I've been telling you the truth," she said. "Tell me what tonight was," I said. She looked down at her hands. "It was drinks with people from the office," she said. "And Daniel was there," I said. A pause. "Yes. Was it just the two of you?" Another pause. Slightly longer. "At the end, yeah? The others left." There it was. The others left. So it had started as a group thing and had, at some point, become just the two of them. And she had not told me this when she said she was going out with some people from the office. And when she'd texted me at 11:43 to say she'd be another hour, she hadn't mentioned that it was now just her and Daniel. And when she'd sent the message at 11:47, she'd sent it because something in that moment, probably something Daniel did or said, had made her feel like she should get ahead of it. "The photo," I said. She looked up. "It was just a photo," she said. "His arm was around your waist," I said. "It was just how we were standing. In the photo you posted publicly." I wasn't thinking. "Camille." Again. Just her name. She closed her mouth. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Nothing is going on," she said. "I'm not asking if you slept with him," I said. "I'm asking how long you've been interested in him." She flinched. Not a dramatic flinch. Just a small one. The kind your body does when it's caught off guard by the accuracy of something. "I'm not," she started. "Don't," I said. Not angry. Just done. "Don't what?" "Don't tell me I'm overthinking it," I said. And I watched something shift in her face. Because those were her words. Her exact words from 4 hours ago. And we both knew exactly how that message had read sitting next to that photo. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It's complicated." 2 words. The 2 worst words. Because those 2 words confirmed everything that couldn't be unsaid after they're said. Complicated means there is something. Complicated means it hasn't been nothing. Complicated means the version of our relationship I'd been living in was slightly different from the version she'd been experiencing. How complicated? I asked. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, face in her hands. I haven't done anything, she said. But you want to, I said. She didn't answer. The not answering was the answer. I don't want to dramatize the next 40 minutes. It wasn't a screaming fight. It wasn't dishes breaking or doors slamming. It was two people in a quiet apartment at 2 in the morning having a conversation that was dismantling something that had taken 3 years to build. She told me it had started a couple of months ago. She told me she hadn't expected it. She told me she'd been trying to manage it. She told me it hadn't gone anywhere, that they hadn't kissed, that she hadn't told him how she felt. She told me she loved me. She said that specifically, with her eyes on mine. And here's the thing that is possibly the most complicated part of this entire story. I believed her. I believed she loved me. I believed she hadn't crossed a physical line. I believed that in some genuine, present way, she didn't want to lose what we had. And it still didn't change anything. Because what she'd also done was this. She had cultivated something with someone else. She had nurtured it quietly. She had protected it by not telling me its full shape. She had said he has a girlfriend, when I hadn't asked, to make me feel like the situation was more contained than it was. She had sent me a message designed to manage my perception rather than to be honest with me. She had posted a photo publicly that told one story while sending me a text that told a different one. And she had looked at me over dinners and couch nights and grocery lists and conversations about which city we wanted to live in and had not told me the truth of what was happening inside her. That is its own kind of crossing. At some point around 3 a.m., she asked me what I was going to do. I told her I didn't know yet. She asked if we could figure it out. I told her I needed some time to think. She asked if she should leave or if I should leave. I said I'd sleep in the other room. She said, "You shouldn't have sent those screenshots to my family." And I said, "You shouldn't have sent me that message while posting that photo." She had nothing to say to that. Neither of us did. We went to our separate rooms. The apartment was quiet in a new way, a way it had never been quiet before. The next morning, her mother called me. I answered, because I respected her mother, and because I wasn't hiding from what I'd done. Her mother said, "That was an unusual thing to do." I said, "I know." She said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Not entirely, no." There was a pause. Then her mother said, "She mentioned Daniel once before. A few weeks ago. I told her to be careful." I sat with that for a moment. She didn't tell me that. I said, "I know," her mother said. Another pause. "I don't know what's going to happen between you two," her mother said. "That's not for me to say. But I want you to know I understand why you did what you did, even if it wasn't the cleanest choice." I thanked her. She said she hoped we could work through it. I said I hope so too. We hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed in the spare room and looked out the window and tried to figure out what I actually hoped for. Here's what I didn't tell her mother, and what I hadn't told Camille directly. There were other things before Daniel, not other men. I don't want to suggest that, because I don't actually know, and it would be unfair to imply it. But there had been a pattern of small dishonesty that I had, over the course of 3 years, told myself were normal. There was the time, about 18 months ago, when she'd told me she was staying late at work, and I'd found out much later, casually, through a mutual friend, that she'd actually gone to a birthday party for someone she'd decided I wouldn't want to hear about. Not because I would have been angry, but because she'd made a decision, unilaterally, that I didn't need to know, and had constructed a simpler story instead. I let it go. I hadn't had all the details, and the ones I had felt small enough to release. There was the time, about a year ago, when I'd found a text on her screen by accident, not snooping, just glancing when her phone was in my hand, and it lit up, from a number I didn't recognize, that said something like, "I've been thinking about what you said." I'd mentioned it. She'd said it was a work thing. I'd believed her, because I had no reason not to. And because the alternative, the place you go when you stop believing, is a place I didn't want to move into permanently. There was the way she sometimes talked about her independence in a way that felt, occasionally, like she was practicing the language of someone who was preparing to use it. Not just wanting space, which is healthy, but talking about freedom and autonomy in these specific, slightly rehearsed ways that didn't quite match the relationship she was ostensibly fully in. And the conversation about trust. The one where she'd said trust means not having to justify yourself to anyone. I'd agreed with it in the abstract. But I had never agreed to be systematically kept in the dark about the emotional direction of the person I was building a life with. That's not trust. That's management. 3 days passed. I stayed in the apartment. She stayed in the apartment. We were civil. We had coffee in the same kitchen. We said quiet, functional things to each other. It was one of the stranger things I've experienced, living alongside someone while figuring out whether you still want to be living alongside them. On the second day, she said, I ended it. I looked at her. Whatever it was, she said. I told him I needed space from the friendship. I told him things had gotten unclear and I needed to reset. I nodded. Okay, I said. That's it, she said. Just okay. What do you want me to say? I asked. I don't know, she said. Something. Anything. I'm glad, I said. But I'm also trying to figure out if this is something we come back from. She looked down. I don't want to lose you, she said. I know, I said. And I did know. The thing that made all of this so complicated was that I didn't doubt her feelings. I doubted her choices. And I was still in the process of deciding whether I could live with both. On the third day, her sister called. Not to defend Camille. Not to ask me to forgive her. Just to talk. She said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. I said, go ahead. She said, before the screenshots, did you try to talk to her directly about Daniel? I thought about it. Once, I said. She told me he had a girlfriend and changed the subject. Her sister went quiet for a moment. That's what I thought, she said. I said, why? She said, because she mentioned him to me about 3 weeks ago, and I asked her, directly, if something was going on. And she said the same thing to me that she probably said to you, that I was overthinking it. I felt something settle in my chest at that. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the weight of having a pattern confirmed. She'd used the same phrase on her own sister. Don't overthink it, which meant it wasn't improvised. It was her go-to line. The phrase she reached for when she wanted to shut down a question she didn't want to answer. I want to say something about the screenshot decision, because I know it's the thing that divides people. I've thought about it a lot since then. There are people who would say I should have confronted her first, given her the chance to explain before going to her family, that what I did was a breach of privacy, that it was an act of humiliation disguised as transparency. I've considered all of that, and here's where I've landed. I tried the direct route. I'd asked about Daniel directly and been given the he has a girlfriend line. I'd trusted her when she said don't overthink it the first time I heard it from her. I was not someone who had failed to communicate. I was someone who had communicated clearly and been managed in response. And the specific combination of events on that Thursday night, the message designed to preemptively reassure me, sent while a photo was being posted publicly that told a completely different story, told me that this was not an accidental miscommunication. This was a deliberate architecture. She was building a structure where she got to have two realities running simultaneously. The reality she presented to me, and the reality she was actually in. And the family chat was, in my mind at the time, a way to collapse those two realities into one visible truth. Not to punish her, not to humiliate her, but because I was done being the only one who was standing inside the real story without anyone else knowing the real story existed. Was it the cleanest choice? No. Was it the most mature choice? Probably not. Was it the choice I would make again, given the same information and the same moment and the same specific combination of screenshot and photo? Yes, without hesitation. By the end of that week, we'd had the real conversation, the full one, the one that took 3 hours and included things I hadn't planned to say and things she hadn't planned to admit. She told me that for the last 2 months, she had felt like she was disappearing inside our relationship. Not because I was controlling, not because I was unkind, but because she was scared. Scared of how real we'd gotten. Scared of how much the future conversations meant. Scared that if she went all the way in, she'd lose herself somewhere in the process. And so she'd found, in Daniel, a place that felt like something separate. Something that was just hers. Something that didn't have weight and history and future attached to it. And she'd convinced herself that as long as nothing physical happened, she wasn't doing anything wrong. As long as she kept it just friends, she wasn't crossing a line. And she'd sold that story to herself so completely that she'd started selling it to everyone else too. Her sister, me, the family group chat, retroactively. I understood that. I understood it more than I wanted to. Because fear of losing yourself in something real is not an unfamiliar feeling. I'd had versions of it. The difference was that when I'd had it, I'd talked to her about it. I'd said, hey, sometimes I feel like I'm losing track of who I am separate from us. Can we figure out how to build space for that? And we had, or I thought we had. But apparently the solution I thought we'd found wasn't the solution she'd found. She'd found hers in a person named Daniel and a green top and rooftop city lights. And she'd done it quietly. And that's the part one still haven't completely forgiven. Not the feeling, the method. At the end of the 3-hour conversation, I told her I needed time. Not a breakup, not a commitment, just time. She said she'd give me whatever I needed. I said I appreciated that. And I sat with the knowledge that the person across from me was someone I genuinely loved, and also someone who had shown me, clearly and repeatedly, that she was capable of choosing her own comfort over my right to the truth. Those two things were both real. And I had to figure out what to do with a relationship where both of those things were simultaneously true. It's been several weeks since that night. I'm not going to tell you we broke up dramatically. I'm not going to tell you we're perfectly fine and everything healed. The truth is messier than either of those endings. We're still together, technically. We're in that territory where the relationship is alive, but in a different form. Where we're both still present, but both still processing. Where some nights are close and some nights are very far apart. And we're both trying to figure out if the distance is temporary or permanent. She's in therapy. That part one respect. She's not using it to craft a better narrative. She's actually doing the work, from what I can tell. I'm not in therapy, but I've been thinking about it. Because there are things on my side of this that I've been looking at. The habit of observing and not speaking. The decision to file things in the back of my mind instead of surfacing them. The way I can convince myself not to push when pushing is the more honest thing to do. Those aren't Camille's patterns. They're mine. And they didn't cause this, but they didn't help either. Her family has been kind to me. Her mother, especially. There have been no accusations. No, you shouldn't have done that. The group chat has been quieter than usual, generally. But when people message in it now, they include me the same way they always did. Which is, I think, its own kind of statement. The thing I keep coming back to, in the quiet moments, is not the photo. It's not even the message. It's the laugh. The real one. The one I'd been proud of causing. I keep thinking about what it means that she laughed that way in that specific moment, in that specific setting, with that specific person. And I keep thinking about whether that laugh is something you can rebuild inside a relationship that's been through what ours has been through, or whether it goes somewhere it can't always come back from. I don't have the answer yet, but I'm asking the question. And I think the asking is the most honest thing I've done throughout all of this. Here's the last thing I want to say. Not to her. Not to Daniel. Not to her family. To anyone reading this who's been in that place where you hold your phone at 11:47 p.m. and see two things on the screen that don't match. You are not crazy. You are not paranoid. You are not the problem for noticing. Your instincts exist for a reason. They've been tracking things longer than your conscious brain has been admitting them. And the moment someone tells you not to overthink something you haven't even said out loud, pay attention. That sentence is not reassurance. That sentence is information. It tells you that something is happening that the person sending it doesn't want you to look at too directly. It tells you that the story being offered for your consumption and the story being actually lived are not the same story. And you are allowed, completely allowed, to decide that you want the real story, even if the real story costs something. Even if the method you use to get to the real story isn't the cleanest one. Even if the family group chat goes very, very quiet. The silence after that message was loud. But I'll take loud silence over quiet lies. Every time.